discrete answers as well. There's overlaps in some of these areas, which you can touch upon. That's okay, but you need to be able to recognize that. So we'll take the first one. Now we need to look at, for example, ethical, quality, security, and privacy considerations. So these are the 4 key areas you need to work on. Within that, we look at data collection in those 4 areas, data ownership in those 4 areas, discoverability in those 4 areas, transformation and publishing, etc. So let's pick one. Let's pick the first one, data collection and acquisition. What ethical things do we need to consider when collecting data?
If it is the information about public, then we need to have consent of people.
See, that wasn't too hard, was it? Yep, do you want to repeat?
We need to have consent of people if we are collecting data about people. So
It's right. Now, does that also tie into privacy?
yes.
There are some overlaps, right? That's why I said sometimes there will be overlaps, but it's okay. You can mention stuff across, but you can say this is one ethical. There's also other privacy issues that you look at as well. So, anyone else wants to try an ethical consideration for data sourcing or acquisition?
Crediting the source.
Crediting the source,
of the
yep.
acquisition.
Yep. So if you're getting it from someone, do you want to then acknowledge them? Otherwise, you're pretty much stealing the data. Right? Especially if you're getting research information coming through. Let's try the next one. How about quality? What quality issues do you need to consider when collecting data?
When collecting it, one of the first ones is considering its use overall. Because if it's broad amalgam data that you're going to be looking at, and the amalgam is what you're interested in as opposed to individual data points, then small aberrations or changes in quality aren't really going to matter. So it's really the use case and a case-by-case sort of consideration. So does this data need to be 100% accurate or not? And to answer that question, you've got to consider what you're actually doing with it as to whether or not that matters at all or how much it matters.
And that is a very good answer. Okay. I would also have gone for the simplest answer to start with. Is the quality good? Is the data clean? If it's not clean, what do we need to do? Right? Try some of the simple things first. You have gone through this in your project. You have got data that's been absolute crap, I'm pretty sure, right? And you've been through a cleansing process. Is that not? Right. So that's, is one of the things that you can think about. There are a lot of things that you have done in your project that will help you answer these questions. Right? You just need to think about it. And then give an example as you go through. So there's a good example of quality. Let's talk about, let's say, we won't go through each one. Privacy. What kind of privacy issues do we need to talk about or consider when collecting data?
What would be the repercussions if this data were to be made public or were to be completely open to anyone, for anyone to look at?
Okay.
So what's the worst case scenario, and that should inform how secure or how you do the process going through it?
There is no incorrect, but later there's bits about publishing and sharing.
It should be unidentifiable, like it should not reveal any personal information about the entity we are collecting data about. Like if we are collecting data about the patient, so it should not mention his name and.
But what is if that's what you need to collect?
But if you make it public, then it's like.
Well, we didn't say making it, we're talking about collection. Remember, each of this talks about collection, ownership, there are different parts to it, right? And it's part of a bit of a life cycle as well. So don't jump ahead, read the question, read all the question, understanding, go back, reread the question again, and then try and tackle it. They're not an easy question, but if you get the sequence right, you will then pick the right answers for the right bits. Otherwise, you just repeat yourself every time, or you're answering the wrong bits in the wrong sections. So if we start looking at data collection and privacy, what kind of things are we thinking about?
Let the user know, like, if that this thing wants to use your location. So let the user know that this sensitive data, we want to use your location.
Okay, so you mentioned something, I don't know what, I didn't hear the rest of what you said, but you mentioned sensitive data. So the first thing you might want to ask, are we collecting sensitive data? And if we are, what kind of safeguards do we need to put in place to make sure that this sensitive data does not get lost in translation or gets up into the wrong hands? Yeah?
You mean how to conduct the collection?
Yeah, well, that's one thing. It depends on how you're collecting the information, right? So the information can be transferred from one machine to another. It could be someone coming in and typing stuff in a form that they're filling in. You could be out there collecting data through a survey. You standing in front of them going, tell me all this stuff, right? There are lots of ways of collecting data. But the fact is you are collecting sensitive data, so what else do you need to consider as part of that collection, right? Have I got the consent from the individuals to collect sensitive data? That's another consideration. There's a lot more. I'm not going to tell you what it is. You guys need to know what it is. Let's take the next one. Actually, I'm not going to go through each one. I'm going to go through publishing and sharing. Okay? So, in terms of publishing and sharing, what are some of the ethical issues you might want to consider?
Proper citation.
Yep. So if you've got someone else's data, make sure you acknowledge or cite them. What else? See, that wasn't too hard either. When you do answer that, don't just say proper citation. What else do you want to say? Remember it's the so what. If we do not cite them properly, then what's the consequence? What is the consequence?
Then it's like copying their work and using it unethically. Because you should obviously cite the person whose data or whose research you are using.
Yeah.
So it comes under ethical.
Yeah, so you could say, at the very least, you are breaching ethical standards by not citing the origins of the data. And you could also be breaching the terms and conditions of use of the data if you don't cite it, correct?
I think I touched on this, what you pointed out earlier on, is what should be shared and what would be consequences of sharing data that is not, as someone else has pointed out, appropriately anonymized or
Yeah.
hidden, and so almost like a cost benefit analysis of what needs to be shared and what doesn't, and what are the implications for sharing the sensitive data if we're using sensitive data.
That's right. Does the data being shared or published need to be approved by a independent ethics committee? Right, it really does depend on where it comes from. If you in academia or doing a lot of research, that may be the case. If you're working within a private organization, they tend not to have ethics committees as such, but there are different levels of approvals that need to go in place. We have the right level of approval before any sensitive information may go out, as an example. How about security? What kind of security considerations do you need to think about in terms of publishing or sharing of information? Remember, publishing is not just putting stuff on a website, right? It could be other means of publishing or sharing the information as well. So what kind of security aspects do you need to consider? Come on, M&S students. Justin, look in here. This should be an easy one.
Access control.
Access control. Thank you, Justin, number 2.
I did.
Explain access control. Don't just use the words access control.
In terms of public sharing, you need to make sure the data, you need to make sure the information you transfer to the proper person who authorized to reach those data. Yes, security concerns with that.
So you need to make sure you give proper access only to the people who are required access to it. So it may be public information, which makes us fine, or it may be restricted access. So you need to make sure there are policies in control, right? What else do you need to do from a security perspective?
Maybe it needs to be encrypted while transferring to someone else,
Yeah,
if
this
it's sensitive.
potentially when you're sharing.
Yeah.
So if you take an example of the justice system in Victoria, you got various groups, you got Department of Justice, you got courts, you have police, you have correctional services, and they exchange information. Each of them are discrete components, but they're part of the whole justice net. Now, when they're transferring information from one entity to the other, absolutely, we are sharing information, number one, but they go through, they harden the systems, they make sure it's encrypted, they have extra levels of security that needs to be put into place. Yeah? Do you understand how to answer this question now? Can I suggest that you take some time to go through that question 12 after this, if you've not attempted it, and try and go through and see if you can make sense of how to approach this question. That question is very unique in its approach. Good. All right, let's go to question number 2. And talk about privacy issues. So this is fairly straightforward. Systems are being developed allowing internet challenges to privacy. The first question, first part. Is profiling good? Why or why not? That's for 2 marks. The second part for that, which is worth 8 marks, list and describe. Remember what it says here, list and describe. 2 benefits and 2 drawbacks of profiling technology, giving an example for each one. So you need to work this one, okay? But let's start with the first one. Is profiling good? Why or why not? How would you approach this question?
If it's done ethically, then it's good.
That's how you'd say it?
And just
How would you answer the question?
Could you sit on the fence and say,
Yes,
Depends.
you can say it depends.
yeah.
Absolutely. Right, as long as it makes sense with your answer. Right, we did say yes or no, but you can say, well, it depends on the context. Because then you're showing us that you actually understand about profiling and the pros and cons of profiling. And it's okay to sit in the fence as well, as long as you justify it. I would start with what is profiling. Give a really quick example of what profiling is. Right? Show us that you understand what profiling means. Is it good or bad? Depends. Depends on how it's used and where it's being used. Profiling can be beneficial because of whatever, or it could be bad, but you got that in the next section. Yeah. But it's okay to sit in the fence. Don't say what the question says is profiling good or bad? Is profiling good? Why and why not? Don't say yes or no because it harms people. That honestly is one of the answers from previous years, where people have just given that, and you go, I don't know whether I can even give you half a mark for that, right? Show us you understand. So, can you list list and describe 2 benefits and 2 drawbacks of profiling technology. Come on.
The advantage would be like tailoring into the particular segment. If I'm a customer, it shows of what I like and it tailors the web page according.
Explain it better.
Sort of customer personalization where you can identify what customer likes or dislikes. So you can what Amazon do basically. They made a recommendation system based on profiling each person. So they identify what they like, what they don't like, and they show it as recommendation.
Give us an example.
Netflix is a pretty good one.
Amazon.
Amazon, so you're looking at retail, pretty much?
Yeah. That's all. So retail, so the first step in sort of marketing 101, segmentation and targeting and positioning. And marketing is a huge cost to businesses in general. If you can automate covers segmenting your customers into distinct groups and know what the likes and dislikes of these groups are, then you can specifically target with great efficacy different products for these different groups and save a hell of a lot of money and actually present these different groups things that they actually want. So there's a big business boom there alone.
Yeah, so what you want to do is have examples and benefits. For example, profiling is used heavily in the retail sector, especially in retail shopping, where organizations use profiles to more closely target their customers with products and advertising. There are several benefits to that. Number one, from a customer perspective, they get hopefully the most accurate marketing towards them with not just information that their own profile, but other people with similar profiles have been purchasing from. Secondly, it allows organizations who do the profiling or the target marketing to more focus their resources, specifically marketing budgets, to having a greater rate of return by more effective marketing. That's one way. The other one you can talk about would be medical profiling. An example of medical profiling is getting someone's medical records together. What's the example in real life? We've talked about it in lectures, it's been in the news. My health records. So this is where if you can tie it to something that's real in the current affairs, my health records, people can opt out of it or they can stay in. So what the government's essentially building is a medical profile of individuals, which can be accessed by medical practitioners all around the country. Now you think of the benefits of that. The benefit is if you are someone who moves around a lot, your medical profile can follow you around. So if you're moving from Perth to Melbourne to Brisbane, GPs that you visit can very, very quickly get access to your medical records. If something happens to you, you are hit by a truck and you're in hospital, they get access to your medical records a lot faster rather than trying to work out who you are and try and get access from your GPs who may and may not be available at that time. You want to talk about the benefits that you get. Don't talk about just the simple stuff, right? Going deeper. What are some of the drawbacks of profiling?
It's not always right. Might not always be right.
Might not always be right. Is that a full answer? Do you want to explain yourself?
Some cases there must still be other answers. Like, say in case of retailing sectors, we just choose our customers and if we try to address to our customers on a particular day or a moment where they are actually interested to buy something but they're not really behind it, then you're left out with the other options. So
Okay.
it just narrows down the.
Some people find that this may be a slight invasion of their privacy. So if you look at Facebook, the number of times you have jumped onto Facebook and they've put up adverts for eBay for things that you've just recently looked at. Any kind of scary, freaky? Yeah? They do that not just for stuff on eBay, it can be anything that you're looking at on the web. They know information about your friends, which is also scary as well. Not yet. We will get to Nora in the next section.
No, I mean, it's a investment kind of thing, that's all, because
It's not Nora. I'll tell you why in a second, okay? All right. So, we can talk about that. And then we'll get to the next part of the question, which is about Nora. So do you know what Nora stands for? What is it?
Non-obvious relationship awareness.
Non-obvious relationship awareness. Where did Nora originate from? No, do not say FBI. It's not from the FBI.
Casinos.
Casinos. Yeah, explain where and why?
It was developed by, I don't know, John something, I forgot the name.
Yeah.
And it was because of identifying if there's no fraud happening in the casinos. It was funded by CIA and then later on IBM bought it.
Yeah. So it was originally developed by the gaming industry in the US in the 70s, specifically to target fraud and money laundering that went through the casino systems. That's the whole idea. It is, as the name says, based on obvious relationships. So the stuff that you were talking about, you have to look at relationships. They don't look at the fuzzy bits in there. It costs too much money. Now, what I want you to understand is Nora, or the concept of Nora type technology, is generally big data, heavy number crunching. You will not use it in your retail marketing. The cost to run that versus the extra 50 cents you're going to get from getting someone to buy some, fish and chips or whatever, it's not going to be worth it, right? The cost of running that's too high. That's why eBay will not run that. It's too expensive. However, it has a lot of value in other cases. For example, the money laundering. There's a lot of value there because we're looking at criminal activities. So we start to think of two benefits and drawbacks of Nora. Now they'll be very similar because Nora is a profiling tool, but it works in a different concept, but it's a much different level. Okay, very big data, very heavy in analytics, heavy number crunching, but also looking at relationships that are not obvious. Based on that, what kind of benefits and drawbacks do you think we're going to get? I don't want the casino example because we've done that. Give me one more example of a benefit.
In national security.
National security, keep going.
They use it to identify terrorists based on their contacts, maybe. Like, there was an example, before someone can board the plane,
Yeah.
maybe they see their IDs and their contact, and they identify there's a relationship between terrorists or something.
I want you to think of how you would phrase that properly. A lot of students have been in the past do a very superficial, we can find terrorists through their phone numbers and known phone numbers of other known terrorists. It's like, you haven't really told us what, tell us something real.
Now, something about their previous travel history, so to use the airport example, has this person ever gone to this place? Do they have any contacts or any sort of ostensible reason to be going to wherever it is they're going? And then previous contacts with perhaps other people who may have similarly, spurious kind of flights that have, or whatever the case may be, and actually drawing these tenuous but meaningful connections that wouldn't otherwise be available with great effect to
that
at
is
least
correct.
highlight something that.
So national security may not necessarily be terrorism related, it could be drug smuggling, for example. So if you look at profiles of individuals who are traveling frequently alone to various destinations around the world, you can then draw a link to certain criminal type activities. I know because I was on the watch list. Yeah, seriously, in the 90s, as a single guy traveling, I used to get pulled up all the time. And I got so pissed off one day, I went, why? Why are you pulling me? I just came back from New Zealand, right? And you're gonna check everything. And it's, they were honest, they said you fit the profile of an international drug trafficker. Which interestingly brings us to the negative things, which is what? What did I just describe? The false positives, right? This is not perfect. So, that's how you answer the question, please. Now, when you answer things like, national security and stuff, please don't say, FBI and the CIA use this for homeland security. We are in Australia, we're not in America, it's not CSI Miami, it's CSI Miami. So, what is the Australian equivalent to the American agencies? ASIO is one, what's the other one that would jump to mind? AFP, Australian Federal Police. Try and use local examples, because it's very painful sitting there, getting all this American stuff coming through, especially when they say they need to dial 911. It's like, we do not dial 911 in Australia. We understand what you're trying to say, but please Australianize it, okay? And whatever you do, don't say that people who are looking to hire you use NORA to find out what activities that you've done, to see whether you are a good candidate for their organization. No one uses NORA for that, okay?
I'd be screwed if they did.
They can't. So you need to understand, don't think superficially, yeah, NORA's a profiling tool, hence it fits in all these categories. It is a specific tool to do a specific thing. You need to reach and understand the question, but also understand the technology behind it. Okay? Right. Now we're going to time. Okay. Let's look at question number 8. I know I'm jumping around with some specific questions here that we might cover. So question number 8 is about the code of ethics, professional issues. Now, one thing I want you to not be concerned about if you get stuff like that, we will always provide you with the ACS code of ethics. So you don't have to memorize it. What I do recommend you do is understand it before you go in, so that when you come in, you can apply it. So go and read it, understand it, but you don't have to memorize it. We will provide it to you. It will be on the exam paper. Okay. So it says here, technology can be misused. The concept of a profession and its associated attributes may help control this. Question number 8A, which is worth 5 marks, says some people think a computer-related career is not a profession. Why would they think this, and give 5 reasons? So essentially what it's saying is, give us 5 reasons why IT is not a profession. What do you think it might be?
Well, you say IT, the question says computer related. So I know I'm sort of cherry picking, but I mean, you could argue that first, computer related, is the person who delivers computers to rooms, so these other computer related careers. So it's a very broad definition.
Yeah, no, there's not. When we say IT related, if you're the delivery guy delivering pizza, it'll make you a chef, right? So if someone is either a programmer or he fixes laptops in a little store somewhere in Richmond, they kind of say, I'm an IT professional.
But there's no central, so there exists the ACS, but there's no sort of mandatory kind of membership within these kinds of societies that dictates whether or not you are the same as that would be for a medical professional.
So is that the answer to one of the answers?
That would be one of them, yeah.
And I would say that's correct. That is one of the things, right? It is not mandatory to be part of the association. What else?
You don't need a professional degree or certified qualification
That is correct. Well, there are universities that provide education, accreditation, etc., for you to be here. You do not need to have a degree to be an IT professional, which means you afford this kind of waste of money, right? No, you haven't. You've learned a lot. It'll take you further. But there are people who have been there, who have not had a formal degree, whether it's an undergrad or postgrad, and are working in the IT field because they've learned along the way. And that tended to be a lot more, that happened a lot more years ago when IT was still a fledgling profession, and people did learn on the job. It's happening less and less now, but there's still people out there. I have worked with guys who were, one guy, Steph, was a marine biologist before joining IT. Another person was a statistician, another one's been an engineer. Completely different course. So while we do provide it, you don't have to go through the ranks to be an IT professional. What else? License.
Like doctor into license.
License, like James Bond, license secure. You are correct. You need to have a professional accreditation or license, so to speak, to be able to practice. So like a doctor, you have to be the accredited medical practitioner, right? Which also gets us to the next bit. If you break any of the codes that your profession has, what happens? If you're a doctor or lawyer, what happens?
License is removed.
You cannot practice, right? If you're a lawyer, you get disbarred. If you're a doctor, you break a Hippocratic oath, you get kicked out. You cannot practice medicine. What happens if you break it? Nothing happens. In fact, you don't even have to be a member of your society, so they can't do anything about you. Correct? So as you answer those questions, make sure you talk about the consequences, right? Always give examples. So that's 5 marks, so we expect to see 5 answers with embellishments to get the full marks. The part B, what is the ACS? Remember, this is 3 marks. So if you say the ACS is the Australian Computing Society, will you get 3 marks? No, you will not. So what else can you add about the ACS?
Function.
Yeah, what's the function?
Assessment.
Okay, so you can talk about the purpose of the ACS. And what else? Very good. Some of the benefits that you may derive from membership of the ACS. Now just don't say benefits, you have to actually talk about the benefits, and there are lots of them. Okay, make sure you understand it. But this is 3 mark question, you just can't say Australian Computing Society. You will not get the full mark at all, not even close. So let's look at 8C. Why are codes of principles and ethics developed and promoted by professional associations? What do you think they are?
To help members make ethical decisions when they do not need they do not know the concept, maybe it's new.
Okay, so there are lots of different reasons. In this way, you guys need to understand more about the benefits the ACS has for you as well. Okay, so let's say Goran works for me, right? And I say, Goran, I want you to go and do something really unethical, right? Yeah, for sure.
How much?
He says how much. However, how can you respond to that? What would you really say?
It depends.
Depends on what?
How much?
Alright, Snare! I want you to do something unethical, yes or no?
I'm sorry, I cannot.
Why?
This is against the code of ethics for my profession.
Okay? You can use it for protection. If you find that you're being pushed down a path where you're being asked to do something that it is unethical, and you're worried that if I don't do it, I might lose my job, you can first of all point to, you can non-member, you can say, I abide by the codes of ethics of my profession, which says that I can't do X, Y, or Z.
Given membership is sort of entirely voluntary, what if your employer, or what if you as the employer doesn't recognise the ACS code of ethics? You say, well look, I employed you as an analyst or whatever it is. And your code of ethics is my business's code of ethics. It's got nothing to do with the ACS.
Doesn't matter because you are a professional and you can go to the ACS, who can be heavy for you, and they will come back with theirs, the lawyers, and say, hang on, you're asking one of our professionals to break our code of ethics. It makes it difficult. It is a layer of protection for you.
It's a layer of protection, but I mean, if it's like, it sort of depends on, now obviously this is an extreme hyperbolic example, but like.
And yes, there are employers that will go, yeah, I don't recognize it, I don't care. Then it's up to you, what do you want to do about it, right? You can stick to your moral high ground, because if it is highly unethical what they've asked you to do, then you wouldn't do it. Now those of you who are from my tube, you know my story, right? My story about, I didn't have to quote the ACS because it was in the UK. But when I was working in London, my VP of sales, international VP of sales, essentially asked me to lie to a customer about the status of the software that we're coming. We didn't even have the software. There were no specs. We hired a bunch of consultants to start looking at it. And I had to go and tell Siemens what we're going to be delivering. I said, I ain't delivering anything. I'm not going to lie. I can't go online. He goes, I'm not really asking you to lie. I said, yes, you are. And a month later, I resigned. And the consequence of me resigning, I didn't quote ACS or anything like that because it wasn't relevant then. I had to move back to Australia because my visa was cancelled, right? It was tied to the job. I didn't have anything to go back to work-wise, so basically I uprooted my life at a lot of cost and moved back here. Because I made a decision to do the right thing, in my mind. You can use that though, if you were pushed down a particular path to say this violates our professional code of ethics. In the same way that a doctor can say that, a lawyer can say that. Now, think of an example of when doctors use their code of ethics in the last 12 months to stand up against the Australian government. Do you know when they did that? The doctors at the Royal Children's Hospital refused to send back the children to Nauru that they were looking for, taken care of, because it breached their code of conduct. They could have been sent to jail, but they stood their ground. Did they go to jail? No, they didn't. It's a very powerful thing that you can use here. There are other things that you can use the ACS for. Networking is another thing that you can use the Computing Society for. What else can you use the Computing Society for? Well, they're supposed to help you further your career, have a map of development that you can do to improve yourself. Use the ACS for that. When you answer this question, try and understand what the society really is. Now, you can argue whether IT is a profession or not. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because we behave professionally. you can utilize the ACS as a proper professional governing body to the best of its advantage. Yeah? And you need to think how you're gonna use that. Now the fourth part, 8D, is really scenario based. And as I mentioned before, you will be given the code of ethics. Now here, we've done similar stuff. We did the, I don't remember what week it was.
I think that should be
You know, BBB and all the ethical debate that we had.
ABC company, ethical morality, I think it was week 6.
Yeah.
week
6, I think.
yeah. We had a debate with BB company and they were releasing a set of surveys that affected some people in 1920s, so
Yeah, if
their
any of you
families.
remember.
Yeah.
Okay, now the interesting part about these kind of scenarios is you can see things from different perspectives. And what you need to do is understand what drives and motivates individuals, because from a scenario, you can argue one point from a legal perspective, you can argue another point from an ethical perspective, you can argue another point from a morality perspective. It depends on where you come from. You can argue both points. Do I, from week 6, if I release the information, I have then breached what we have promised to the family and to the women from the 1940s. However, by releasing that information, we could potentially have millions of people with a better life. Which is more important? It's not easy, right? There's not always a single right answer. What you need to be able to do is to look at that and argue a point. How many of you have done any of the law units?
I've done in my undergraduate in the UK.
I mean, I'll take contract law as a perfect example of where you can really argue stuff either way, right? And you can do that here as well. You need to back it up, but you need to back it up and relate it to the code of ethics that we have here. So for example, let's take the question, how would you answer it from the consultant's perspective? What do you think the consultant should do? Are you all busy reading the question now?
Make clear his conflict of interest.
Yeah.
The very first thing is to make it clear that this consultant has a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
So that any bias is then at least understood or highlighted that there may be a potential bias there, that everyone's on an equal playing field.
But,
Either that or recuse himself entirely from that.
yeah, so that's the one part of the answer. Which part of the code of ethics would you refer that to?
Without having a code of ethics in front of me,
It should be there, shouldn't it?
sorry?
It's in the question.
No.
No, there's
No,
no-
it's not.
It is there.
6 core ethical values associated with it, so it's,
No, that's,
Okay, so the code of ethics, I'll just tell you what it says. So, primacy of public interest, enhancement of quality of life, honesty, competence, professional development, and professionalism.
so they come with public interest, privacy and public interest and honesty.
Yeah, you can come in 1, 2, 3, you can argue, as long as you justify it. Some people may argue 1, some may argue 3. You need to be able to point it back to the different parts here. I mean, I can look at professionalism as well, in a way.
Can you give us an example?
Of what?
Based on that.
So I would talk about having to provide a high degree of transparency in the activities that happen, and I can relate it back to the primacy of public interest, to honesty, because things have happened and I want to disclose what has happened. I can also talk about professionalism. In fact, I can associate with a lot of these things. right? Professionalism, I'm behaving professionally, I am disclosing what I believe to be something that will affect the outcome of the work that I'm doing, because I have a bias against that. That's behaving professionally, in my opinion. Okay, so there are lots of things you can think of how you want to apply to the ACS. You will have it if in the exam, so you don't have to remember it. You just need to apply the answers. Does that make sense? Now the same thing will happen with the community or the chairman of the board. Now, an interesting thing that we kind of discovered earlier this morning. Does anyone know what the chairman is? Do you know how a board works? Do you know what the difference is between the chairman of the board or the CEO of an organization? Or is it different? Okay, so the CEO, let's take Google as an example. The CEO of Google works from the operational side of the organization. So they make all the decisions on how to run the company. There is a separate group called the board, and that's run by the chairman of the board. They represent the shareholders. Because remember, how many people own share in Google? Millions and millions of people. Now, they can't individually talk to these people, so they go through the board. The board's main concern is to look after the shareholders. Not the company, but the shareholders. But there's a much bigger thing at play. So there are times where things that the management team, the CEO, etc., from Google may want to do, that will need to then go to the board for ratification and approval as well. So in a way, it's kind of a little bit higher, but they are two separate entities. They're looking after two completely different things. So in a question like this, when it says the chairman of the company or the board, what they're primarily looking after are the shareholders. So if you think about what their motivations would be, then you will answer the question based on that motivation.
So, I mean, are we then to assume that the chairman, given the chairman's primary kind of answers to shareholders, are we then to assume that the chairman is going to act exclusively in the name of profit or increasing the value for the firm?
Something
Without
that doesn't
considerations,
hurt the long-term prospects of the firm. It doesn't mean that they're going to burn people just to make a profit. They're not looking at short-term gains. They also have to look at long-term gains. They have to look at just the small things that happen. How is that going to affect the share price, long-term share prices, long-term viability of the organization? So if you start looking at what happened recently with Mr. Musk, with his tweets, what happened?
He's an idiot. He got himself and Tesla fined a lot of money because of tweets about taking Tesla private. And the SEC went, hey, you can't do that without actually having a basis sort of background for it, because it was viewed as manipulating the share prices, and the Securities and Exchange Commission fined both him and the company sizable chunks of money for it.
What happened to Tesla's share prices?
Well, no, they spiked. They went up because
Increase
there
about
was-
$10 per share.
Which is contrary to what he would have done, right? But there's more than just the share prices. There's people's perception of the organization. They're looking at the leadership that's there. And at some stage, the board would have looked at them and gone, hang on, we need to make some changes. Right? Because they are looking at the long-term ongoings of that organization. Okay. The next one was question 9. Okay, all right. Let's have a look at question 10. Sorry, question 8. Oh, sorry, 9. Okay, 9, again, it's just next simple one. It's professional issues, quality and reliability. So working as an IT professional, you have great responsibility, like Spider-Man. IT systems are often highly complex, consist of interconnected combinations of technology, organizations, and people. Reliability is obviously crucial, and unreliable systems can cause disaster. The question is, what is an unreliable system? And give 3 examples of the consequences when an external public system has been unreliable. Remember, this is 8 marks. So what would you say? What's an unreliable system?
One that doesn't consistently do as people who are using it expect it to do.
There's no one single definition. You're both right, but I want you to define it, okay? And the more you do, the more examples of unreliability, the better it's going to be. Now, someone said this morning, a system that doesn't scale, is that an unreliable system? No, it's still working. Just shit, it's slow. Yeah? So you need to know exactly what unreliability is. If it's not available to you when you need it to be, is it unreliable?
Yes.
Can you remember what example I used in the lecture of an unreliable system at Monash? It starts with M. Yes, Moodle. Is Moodle a reliable system? No, not really. Right? Does it matter to you if it's unreliable?
Yes. We're paying a lot of money for it.
Generally, it's a pain if it's not bad. But you can get by, right, when it comes back up. Except when it comes to submission of assignments. So as soon as assignments due, it becomes a crisis. And that's when it's really a pain. But that's an example of an unreliable system. Would you consider your IE application a reliable system?
Yes.
Sorry, I just have to throw that in and see how you reacted. Probably most of you not.
Could we say, like one example that comes to mind for me is the ransomware that was on a bunch of NHS hospital computers in the UK, and was that late last year or middle last year? 2 years ago. Yeah. But I mean, this was an entire sort of system of holding all of this patient data. Did you say that because of the holes in security, it is inherently unreliable?
If you actually look at the definition of system reliability, it's nothing to do with the security, the holes and the flaws that it has. It talks about the availability of the systems to work in for the period that it's supposed to be working. So a lot of times they measure reliability through MTTRs and some of the other similar relationships. So there's mean time to resolution, mean time to whatever. Yeah.
But given this is the sort of thing that you, particularly for patient data and working in hospitals where access to this data is very crucial, surely security and the fact that that was able to happen at all would be a reflection of that system and its maintenance. Like, is that not? I mean, because I feel like
it depends on why. I mean, you could have a system being, DDoS attacked and stuff like that, and really bringing it down. This is malicious stuff. Rather than really poor coding, people don't, developers haven't tested it properly, falls over because, no one's applied patches and no one's tested it on the newest version of the OS. Well,
that's the thing. If it wasn't patched, then surely the onus is on the developers and the maintainers to
Yeah,
absolutely protect
Yeah.
against, that's what I'm saying.
as opposed to something that's up to date, up to speed, but someone managed to find a loophole, which is slightly different. Okay, so it kind of yes and no answer to that. It's a big depends. But that's talking about system reliability.
So, to really answer the question is, give the definition and then followed by the consequence about the word.
Yeah, yeah. So what is the definition? So who's got, well, all of you got your laptops. So can you go into Google and talk about measure of system reliability? It's actually very specific about what system reliability is, right? What does it say? Yeah. There are official definitions, you can Wikipedia stuff about system reliability that you can quote. But I would like you to say, you know, this is a Wikipedia definition of what system reliability means. This is my understanding of what system reliability means, and this is how I see it applied around me. These are some of the issues that I've seen with systems that I've worked with, that I have been unreliable. You can talk about Moodle, and you can talk about examples that have happened in the news. So what are some of the specific examples in the news around unreliable systems that you can remember? And I did cover quite a few in the lecture.
Woolworths, their checkout system.
Yeah, so the POS system in both Coles and Woolworths went down for a while, which meant what? Remember, every time you answer, you talk about the consequences. What happens?
So the customer satisfaction will decrease because of the bad shopping experience.
So that's one, and then people couldn't complete the transactions properly unless they had cash.
The
So
initial
it was a
rollout,
POS.
Mike. The initial Mikey rollout.
Yeah, the initial market rollout, again, talk about the consequences of that. What else did we have that was an issue?
Internet banking.
From which bank? I just answered the question, which bank? Combank. So CBA, twice this year, the internet banking has gone down. That's twice in a year, it's not very good. So what you want to talk about, the consequences of the internet banking going down. For some people, it may not be too much of an issue because all they need to do is wait 3-4 hours before it comes back before they can access their money. However, with other people, there may be dire consequences where they're expecting money to be transferred from one banking account to another, which could be for their loan repayments, home loan repayments with another bank, and that could incur penalty because it hasn't gone through. Now, while it's not their fault, and it probably will be acknowledged it's not their fault, there's still a problem of how they're going to resolve it. The banks may take responsibility straight away and sort it out themselves, or you may have to go and fight for it and recognize that it was a fault. So you want to talk about the consequences of these things. Now, if you can't pick specific consequences, talk about general consequences and general issues of faults. So if we speak generically, can you give me an example of a failure of an unreliable system and the consequences?
ATM.
ERP scheduling system, if it breaks down, the production plan of the organization will fail. So it will also have the business impact.
The what system? The ERP?
ERP scheduling system.
Yep,
It makes the production for the planning.
yep.
Yeah.
So here's an example of a more generic failure. Not specific or something that happens in the news, but in this case, we have a back office system that's gone down, that's affected the manufacturing performance of an organization, as an example. What was yours?
ATM.
ATM?
System down, and people can withdraw money more than they require.
Okay, so there's no limits. Okay, so there's one. Normally when we talk, there's a different problem. There's no unreliability here. Unreliability is not available. Okay, so you can also use an example, and you can talk about the consequences of unreliable systems. So take an airport. You could have an unreliable control system, a tower control system go down. What are the consequences of that? Air traffic control system goes bonkers. What happens? People can die. Lots of people in planes we can't land, can't be scheduled properly, and probably need to be rerouted to another airport further away. If it's an international flight, have they got enough fuel to get there? What's going to happen? Is there a manual process that they can go through? Lots and lots of really difficult questions. Now, in the same airport, if the ticketing system goes unavailable for an hour, what happens? The ticketing and boarding system, so when you come in, you want to check in, if that doesn't work, do you think people will be, people's lives are at stake? Probably not. There'll be a lot of very, very upset people. It'd be extremely inconvenienced. But when he comes back on, they'll probably get processed and they'll go through. They may be late for flights.
Only if the traveling passengers in the case of emergency.
Yeah, it's not to say the person has got a heart transplant, it's a big problem, or anything like that. Okay, these are extreme cases, but in general it won't. But if an air traffic controller tower goes down, you've got a lot of planes up there with people that need to come down, right? That's much more dangerous. And you can think of lots of different examples. But when you do, talk about the examples, talk about the consequences of them as well. Okay, so there's heaps that you can do. 9B. The product you created in your IE unit needs to be robust, reliable, and of good quality. List and describe all the processes you considered you have used to improve the quality and reliability of your application. Now, you notice that we talked about quality and reliability, so don't just look at reliability, right? We're talking about quality as well. So, this is where you draw back onto your IE project. And this should be a simple, no-brainer one. This is easy marks. What would you have done to improve the quality and reliability of your app? What's that?
User test.
Is that the first thing you would start with?
Just press the pop-up.
Okay, so user acceptance test. How does that help?
To identify.
You have to work for your 10 marks. So,
To identify the gaps from the user expectation and improve the quality to close the gap.
okay, so that's one, user acceptance testing. Anyone else? What other things have you done in your IE project?
This should be the easiest to answer.
You draw back on the experiences that you had. Do you not remember your IE project? Yeah.
Yeah, so how I would answer this question is I would describe every process that happened in our service, like data processing and then design of the system and then development and simultaneous testing. And then I would describe best practices in each of those processes that we follow to ensure the system quality was at its best in every aspect. And not just testing, but also in,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, we're not looking for a description of the life cycle that you went through. We want you to be able to associate the things that you've done and how they could have improved quality and reliability. I'll be using things like a retrospective. After every iteration, after every sprint that we've done, we did a retrospective. And the purpose of the retrospective is to improve the processes, put the high level of governance, and to make sure that we don't follow the same mistakes that we have been doing in the past. That's one way, right? All of you did retrospectives. It should be popping on your head. What are the other things that you've done to improve quality and reliability? We went out, we spoke to our user base. We had constant feedback from our users. That's another thing you can say. How does that improve? You can describe how that improved it. We had regular meetings that with outcomes that were documented. We followed a strict process, or strict guidelines. We had strict governance. Whatever you've done to improve it. There's lots of things, 10. You should be able to rattle off 20 off the top of your head on how you have improved it. And give examples of why it would have improved it.
I say like interview. Users.
Again, how? What do you mean by just saying interviewing? We interviewed users doesn't mean anything because you're not telling me why it has improved it.
Please interview with users and make the requirement clear.
Again, I want you to answer it properly because right now what you've told me, I'm not going to give you any marks for. Because it's not to say that you're wrong, but you're very unclear about what you're trying to say.
Get better communication with the stakeholders and ask what they want and we follow the professional standard. And with the security concern.
You've said lots of correct things, but in some disjointed ways.
Very broad.
Yeah. Talk about specific things. I'm not saying you're wrong. Then you can say we consulted a lot with our customers and utilize that time to really make sure that we are delivering what they're asking for. Okay, and also improving the quality of the procedures, the processes, the interaction that we have or that they have with the application.
Can I argue that using agile software development as a way to manage our browsers could be one metric or measure for reliability?
It's just using agile to give you reliable software.
The entire components, like we take the user story and then the second iteration, we actually improve the user story based on feedback from the first iteration.
Remember, it's about quality and reliability to try and frame it within that. But yes, you can say we use the agile methodology, but we used it in such a way that, and these are the things that we did to make sure that quality and reliability was at its highest. You need to talk, you just can't say we use agile. That doesn't cut it. Because, you can use agile badly.
One thing can be because of agile, you have more user interaction and user interaction which increase the reliability or the quality of the product.
I'm just thinking whether I want to go through more questions. Just you guys haven't attempted the questions. I'm just repeating everything I've said again and again and again. You're not really giving me back much. So why don't we take it down a different path? Do you have a much better understanding now than you did when you came into this room about how you should approach the exam and answer the questions?
Yes.
Are you a bit more confident in doing that?
Yeah.
Do you still believe that you have a lot of work ahead of you?
Yeah.
Good. That is one of the things that we want to, make sure that you do. You do have a lot of work because the way you would have approached this, coming into this, you would have done pretty poorly. And I say that because I've seen it in the past. A lot of questions, a lot of students have come through and given a very simple, generic answer, thinking that I have answered the question. So some of the things that you need to consider when you answer, okay, I'll ask you first. How would you answer the questions differently now that you've been through the sessions? What are the changes you're going to make to your approach?
More specifically, please example.
Louder.
make the answer more specific and better with example.
With examples, yeah, okay, good. How else would you make it better?
Consequences, which is the result as an example.
Yeah. Always think, so what? When I'm answering this, so what? Why would someone actually care about this? It's the same things as what we talked about in IE all the time. When you tell us about things, oh, I want to do this function, or I want to do this, we always ask you, so what? You need to tell us so what. How else would you improve this? Louder.
Correlating.
Correlating, what do you mean by that?
I mean, as you said, there were few sort of codes in ACS that may overlap each other.
Yep.
But like how you correlate those two things like ethical and privacy together sometimes in a particular example, that sort of.
Yep, and sometimes there are multiple answers and multiple ways you can approach answering the question. How else would what would you change to in your approach? What
I will
else?
answer the questions the way I taught. So instead of answer like from some book or like the definition like very academic ones,
Yeah.
and I try to avoid very complicated words.
Yeah. So apart from avoiding, you can put complicated words in there. We may have to look at dictionaries, but as long as it comes across and it's used properly. But you're right, try and approach things. Sometimes a simple answer is actually the right answer. You don't have to overthink that stuff. A lot of students who go into the exam panic because they try and think of the most complex answers. Sometimes the answer isn't complex. The thought process you go through to get to it may be complex, but the answer may be quite simple. You need to make sure that we understand that you know what you're talking about. That's why standard definitions tend not to work very well. However, I will say that there may be questions where you are asked to give a standard definition. For example, someone says, give us the 5 stages of team development according to Tuckman. You have to talk about the 5 stages, so that's memory work. However, what can you do to improve that answer? Sure. You can relate it to your experiences, so your IE projects, the things you've done at work, the things that you have experienced yourself. So you can talk about, the first stage. What's the first stage in Tuckman's? Forming. Yeah, so you can talk in the forming stage, this happens, right? According to Wikipedia or according to the notes. In our IE project, we form extremely quickly and we progress to the next stage by week 2, week 3, week 4. You guys decide. What's the next stage? Storming. Storming is when we had the longest time in. Right? Yep. And we've spent a fair bit of time storming because we didn't really get it. We were trying to do things that we weren't really comfortable with, and most of us were pretty green. This tells me that you understand the stages and you can relate it to real activities, real life. Do you understand what we're talking about now? So while there may be bits where you need to do the Wikipedia type, follow that with examples that show you know what it's about. And many students that come through, they just do the simple stuff that they'll say, what is NORA? NORA stands for non-obvious awareness, and that's about it, right? They don't explain anything else, they don't talk about the history, and some people also relate to it to the North American Retail Treaty, which is completely wrong, right?
One is snoring again.
Snoring.
Yeah, something is snoring.
Yeah. It's okay to do some academic type answers, but which is not what we're looking for. We need to be able to tie some of the academic understanding or theoretical understanding to practical understanding. Again, we say we're looking for applied learning. Okay? Question 12 is a great example of applied learning. It's not specific to a topic, it goes across all topics. It's there for you to show how you understand working with data. Okay? You try and nail that type of question, you will do well in the other ones. Have you got any questions for us?
How many questions?
There are 6 questions totaling up to 100 marks. You have 3 hours to answer the questions and 10 minutes reading time. Now these are indicative type questions. You can pick 6 questions over here. They will be indicative of the 6 questions that you'll be looking at.
We don't have any options.
No, you do not have any options. There is one question that has an Australian component and a Malaysian component. Obviously, you pick the Australian one. But no, there are no options. But neither are they multiple choice questions either. They are all like this.
So the question you.
Hang on, guys. Don't.
So the question you next going to ask is the same.
What?
Maybe. It's not 100% sure.
No, these are just samples. These are samples. They're-
You're not giving
These
me
are not the
questions.
exam questions.
He'll blame you during the exam. They were here.
Yeah.
This is what he told me.
Have you got any questions for us? Remember, this is the last console.
So, if you're allocating, say, 25 minutes, half an hour each question, I suppose maybe more specifically, if you were to sit down and do this exam yourself, or the 3 of you, do you think that you'd use the entirety of 3 hours, or would you just sort of revise well enough and kind of have your thoughts organised well enough? Do you think you'd finish before that and actually give a decent grade or get a decent grade?
See, this is the difficult
3
one,
hours is
because-
very generous, but it's also like sometimes there's not that much content to write.
I would say that most of you, if you want to do well, will require the full 3 hours. Even if you're not going to do well, it's going to require the full 3 hours. Now, unless you're a gun, like if I did it, I won't need the 3 hours. But that's different. Well, first of all, I've got the damn paper. Secondly, I've got a lot more experience than you have, and I know how to answer the way you need to be answered. Take the 3 hours. There'll be some questions, and don't say, if it's worth 20 marks, I'm going to spend an even proportion of time. Sometimes you're going to struggle with the simple 16-mark question, as an example, right? And you may take a lot more time on that. By now, you have your own strategies on how you're going to approach and answer the questions. When you get in there, you got your 10 minutes, you're going to look at the questions, then you're going to prioritize how you're going to attack it. There's some ones that you're going to leave later because it's going to be harder, and you need to get your mind going. Answer the easier ones for yourselves first, get through that quicker, and then spend more time on the more difficult questions. Now, when I say more difficult, everyone's different. It depends on your knowledge. Depends on your confidence level. Okay, the shorter questions may not be the difficult questions, or may be for you.
And pay special attention to the wordings in the questions. If it's a not, or if it's
And or
and, or.
list, describe.
Remember, read these and or not. Sometimes you'll be give a list and examples. A lot of students tend to just do one and not give examples, especially when we ask you to use and give examples. Also look at the total of marks allocated. that will give you a good idea on how much you need to write. You guys are a bit late. We're just finishing up.
Who has the attendance sheet here?
It doesn't matter because you're late.
It's almost full.
Have you guys filled in your names?
So just remember, go through, read the question, really understand the question. Don't forget the little things at the ends and nots or pause. Because sometimes I've had students who missed out like not. And they've answered it in the affirmative and it really missed out and got everything wrong. If it's, say, list 5 things about a topic and you list 10 things about the topic, we will only look at the first 5. And if the first 5 is wrong and the next 5 is right, you get 0 marks. You cannot kind of go for the napalm approach and spray and pray and hope that you're going to get some of these answers correct.
So if you do, what you're saying is randomize the order of the list. And then
Yeah, you can try and do that. But I have seen students do that. They've given a lot more than what we asked. So we say, give us 5, they're given like 8 or 10, hoping that in there, they're gonna get 5 correct. That shows us you're not confident in your answers. You're just guessing. Okay. Yep.
I have one question about question 11B. You say describe and show how you will use in the following scenario. Does it mean we have to use the 6 cards to solve the ethical problems to analyze the scenario, or we just come up with our own solution?
So you're looking at 11B?
Yeah.
Framework. You need to go back to the framework. You need to refer to the framework for that.
So we have to, according to the scenarios, to analyze like what
Yep.
they are doing.
So it says here, describe in detail how you use the framework to the scenario. So as you answer the question, refer it back to the framework. In the same way, when we look at the ACS example, you want to push it back to the ACS code of ethics and how you would apply that in those scenarios to the different individuals and why it would be important to them. Okay. All right, anyone else? If you haven't filled in the attendance list, please fill it in, and when you have, send it on.